Hi, this is KP with Coronavirus Diaries, a channel dedicated to the documentation of a world under lockdown. In the next couple weeks, I'm going to be diving deep into some manipulative news stories regarding whether or not the disease is actually weakening or getting stronger, how contagious it is from asymptomatic people, how long it survives on various surfaces, and how much UV light affects it. I was about to start this little fact-checking mini-series when I saw something trending on Twitter that is a great demonstration of why I feel the need to do this in the first place. That way you can see how I look at the news to get a little perspective as to where I'm coming from with all of this. See, I'm dating myself here, but when I was growing up, there was no such thing as the 24-hour news cycle. You got your news primarily from three places: the paper, the radio, and TV. Cable wasn't as prevalent at the time, and streaming didn't exist yet. And once you read the paper and listened to or watched the news at a certain hour, that was it. You formed your opinions about what you just learned, and you moved on with your life. They gave you the important news items, and the stories were, for lack of a better word, finite. Later, with the advent of the internet and cable being more readily available, the 24-hour news cycle was born, so now the stories are no longer finite. They never really give you a chance to take it in, have a breather, and think about what you just learned, because in the next hour you're going to hear it all again about 5 more times. And when that particular piece is no longer driving the listeners to your station, you move on to something else that you think people will watch, even if it's a non-story. There's a need for constant reporting, so with the 24-hour news cycle, you either get lots of repetition or lots of filler. Then social media came along and reinforced it all even further, because now, since people aren't getting their news from TV as much anymore, in order to compensate and make ad revenue, you need to get people to click on your headline, share or retweet your story, and talk and argue about it. This was never the case before social media. News was not as interactive unless you wanted to write an op-ed piece for a paper. Now, not only do you get the immediate reactions, but you also get quantifiable statistics on how your stories are doing in the form of analytics. And therefore, you can adjust your reporting and how you word things accordingly to get a larger audience and collect more ad revenue. Let's think about that for a second. Media corporations now have a completely different set of motivations for how they write their headlines and stories based on a certain type of technology, social media, and how it interacts with the people consuming the news. The success of a story is dependent on one thing now: engagement. Therefore, it's no longer as important to report the news as it is to get an emotional reaction from people in the form of engagement. Let me show you an example of this. This morning I jumped on Twitter to see what was trending, and to my surprise I saw a case of bubonic plague is reported in northern China's Inner Mongolia. And sure enough, when I clicked on the story, there it was: bubonic plague in China, along with well over 1,000 comments. And I reacted in much the same way I'm sure a lot of people reacted, like, really, China? What's going on over there, y'all? And judging by the reactions here, I wasn't too far off. This guy says China is a cancer on the world. This one says we should nuke China. Nuke 'em. Yeah, and so on, until I scrolled down a little further and saw someone ask the question, is it worth pointing out the U.S. has more cases of bubonic plague than this every year? And she's absolutely right. In fact, this big breaking story is about one single case found in China. Let's compare that to bubonic plague in the rest of the world every year. As you can see, we have plenty of statistics and graphs that show that of the countries that do have bubonic plague cases, China is actually one of the lowest in the world. So if this is something that is more prevalent in other countries and has been since the turn of the 20th, not the 21st, but the 20th century, and if the numbers of bubonic plague cases is actually higher in other countries, why are they reporting this? Why is this important? And more to the point, why are they reporting this right now? I think you can guess. This is how you keep people's attention. It's also how you keep people scared. People reporting on the coronavirus is starting to bore people, perhaps, and they need something new, like murder hornets, another non-story that got people nervous for the future that all but disappeared in about a week. And you can take this next part with a grain of salt, but I also think it's interesting that of all the non-stories to report on, they choose the most well-known historical plague, make it sound like it's coming out of China to get us, and it just so happens to have the nickname of Black Death. In fact, that's what's trending right now: Black Death. Now think about that hashtag for a minute, especially in the context of the protests and everything else going on in the world, and tell me the timing of all this doesn't seem a little suspicious. I realize this theory might be a little out there, but when you consider internet-driven news and those specific trending search terms going along with a total non-story, I think there could be something to it, especially since there's probably a segment of the population that doesn't know that bubonic plague has that nickname and assumes something else entirely when they see the trending phrase of Black Death. Anyway, just something to think about. Stay safe out there and God bless. This is KP, signing off.